to me, we've been given Eden. We legitimately have been given Eden. There's a way to live here. And I'm in devotion to that, And so I don't want to be other places. It's so special to get to be here when we do it well. We know truth. We know truth. We feel it when it's spoken. We feel it in a piece of art. We feel it in a song. We know truth, right? And we all have that capacity moment by moment to discern. Is this an opening to life? Is there an innocent, joyful expression in what is happening? Or is this feeling of being closed, agitated, frustrated, burdened? I am Thomas Doochin, and it is a pleasure to be here on Your Superior Self.
Thomas, my brother, I can't believe we're here right now having this conversation. We shared space back in May on my birthday. That was a very sacred space, and I can't thank you enough for that experience. But I want to know more about you and, how you've gotten to do the work that you're doing. But before we tap into that, I really want to understand and know, like, how do you experience this reality?
Yeah, Trey, I was tuning in this morning to this conversation, and I actually want to lead us off with a prayer, if I have your blessing to do that on your show.
Absolutely.
Okay. Creator, it's your son, Thomas Andrew Doochin, and I sit here in this virtual world looking across from my brother, Trey Downs III, and we're gathered here in service to those hearts and those ears that are the exact right people to listen to this episode at this exact time in their life. And so as we have this conversation, as we spiral into these deeper layers of truth that emerge through us, I ask that they present themselves in a way that is in service to life on this earth, in service to men's nation, in service to women's nation, in service to all of the living beings that encompass this incredible, inordinately explained earth reality. And so may this conversation, this dialogue, this unfolding be in service just like that. And as we find ourselves in that current, may we also experience the joy and peace in sharing the truth that is wanting to come through these very vehicles. And so may I be a conduit for that, and may this conversation lead us exactly where it's needing to go. And thank you for this moment in time and space, this precious moment in time and space that will never be exactly like it is right now. May I show up to experience it fully. I hope. Thank you. Thank you.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Where do you go when you tap into that?
Honestly, Trey, it's like a dance, because I'm tracking that I'm my heart is wanting to evoke this energy of prayer in this space so we can actually say something real, right? Because I'm not interested in just regurgitating the same things I've said up until my point in this life. And I'm not interested in offering that as a gift to the people listening. I really want something to emerge in this space that I didn't know I knew, or that you didn't know that you knew, right? And I also have a personality that's aware that we're on a podcast and I'm being recorded, and I'm trying to tap into that current. And so my experience there is a fluctuation between coming up into my head and trying to find words that might seem poetic or beautiful, and then dropping into the actual longing in my heart. And so I found in my own journey, my way into prayer is at some point the energy drops away from here, and it's like I'm talking from here. I'm seated here. It's like I'm seated on a meditation cushion here. And I'm paying attention to what's going on there, and then I'm speaking from that place. And I believe so deeply that truth spoken creates our reality. Truth spoken creates our reality, right? And so when we speak, when we situate ourselves in that place of truth and we speak from that place, we create the reality of that truth, right? Does that make sense? So like when I'm actually seated in that place here, which is my connection to all of life, and I'm speaking from that place, reality then follows, because it's kind of like everything in the universe is waiting to harmonize with that frequency of truth. Everything is waiting to harmonize with that frequency of truth. And so when we're able to tap into that and it's spoken, it's like everything takes its place of like, oh, this is how I'm allowed to be. This is how I want to respond. And to me, that segues really well into what we experienced at Breathwork and Brotherhood. Like we step into this space, this circle of 20 men that have all just met for the first time in an evening. Truth is spoken, and our beings are then allowed to harmonize with that truth, right? Like there's something in us that just knows of, okay, this is a space for that truth to be present. Okay, let my being, let my body, let my spirit harmonize to that truth. And I'm a total human being with a personality structure. And so I'm always fluctuating between like dropping in and trusting that truth versus all of the stories that are trying to keep me safe or protected by creating a life based on my past experiences, right? That's how our nervous system knows safety. Of like, well, I haven't died up until this point, so let me just keep doing the same thing. I've been on dozens of podcasts. Let me just say the same things that have worked before, and that's safety. But that's not actually truth, And so I'm always in that dance, even inside my own personhood.
Sure. That's beautiful. I just find it so fascinating. It's like real time creation, right? Like really just living from that space, right? And then allowing the universe to unfold in a way that is like a dance, to your point. But I want to know, like, Thomas, like, who were you before, like the persona, right? Like, I'm just interested in like what was the change that occurred? What was the process of change for you? Like, was there a moment in your life where you just really started to not live by the standard of which most American men in the United States live by? Because I feel like your life is very unique to you. I see you doing a lot of magnificent and fabulous and very powerful ceremonies where a lot of men become frightened. I was frightened when I sat in a circle with another man and stared into his eyes. All these programs started to come up for me and arise in a way that showed in fear. And I heard the old voices of my childhood come up. So, like, how did you find this work? What did it look like? Was it there's some type of event that unfolded in your life that really led you down this path?
Thank you, Trey. Yeah, and I want to just briefly, what's coming up is the tenderness that I felt for you in the circle that night, knowing that it was your birthday, it was the anniversary of your grandfather's passing, who you're named after, that lineage of men, and you were sitting in that circle on your birthday doing that type of work. And that's an imprint that's just stayed with me of like, oh, Trey Downs was in the circle that night, and we got to share that together. So thank you for showing up to that. And yeah, when I was in my 20s, I mean, even in my teens, by nothing of my own accord, and that's really important, by nothing of my own accord, I was given these skills and traits that are reinforced as successful in our modern post-capitalist society, right? And so I was doing all of the right things. I graduated top of my high school class, could go to whatever university I had wanted to. I got to university. I started this social impact startup because that was the thing that felt like the most beautiful expression of my personality at the time. And we raised money for that and we grew that. And so I was doing all of the right things. And there was a pretty deep emptiness in there, like of like, man, okay, this is everything that people say I should want. And yet I'm not feeling that like oomph in my life, that like vigor to be alive in the same way. And I ended up going through a decomposition of a relationship, a 5-year relationship that to me had felt like it would have been my life partner, but it wasn't that in truth. And as a part of that, we also got pregnant unexpectedly, but surprisingly, and kind of reoriented our whole life around that pregnancy and then lost the baby. And so all of that spiraled me into a really deep chapter of grief, a really deep chapter of grief. And that work fell away, home fell away, community fell away, this partnership fell away. And yet, as all of those things fell away, it's like I was standing there in this field and I was like, oh, this is my life. This is my life. And I'm not productive. I'm not really creating anything. There's not a lot of joy, but fuck, I'm alive. Like, this is my life. This is spirit. This is earth moving through me. And that was 5 years ago. And that still remains as one of the most precious periods of my entire life. Like, there are still days I yearn for how raw and open to life that I felt in that time, right? Where my like personality structure felt totally disassembled. It was hard to even know who I was at that point, and then as it goes, like I reassemble, right? Like, so that big crack in the egg happens and then we reassemble because we have to exist in this world. And my practice these days, and I deviate so hundreds of times every single day, but it's, can I stay that open to life moving through me? Can I stay that like tenderly, soberly, raw, and open to what's moving through me and around me? And at this point in my life, Trey, I would say that I don't receive a lot of fulfillment when I'm creating from my personality. And I still do it all the time, all the time. And it doesn't really like meet that deep longing in me and that reason I came to this earth. Like the joy for me is in creating from my heart, in creating from that place of truth that isn't even mine. It's not like the personal I, Thomas, bringing it through. It's like, oh wow, this is what wants to come through me in this life, and I'm allowing it to happen. And I'm in a process every day of like, can I just make more space for that to happen? Can I make more space for that to happen? Can I make more space for that to happen? um, and to answer your question a little more directly, the illusion of the American masculine story never really hooked me. Like it just never really gripped me. Like even in high school, it was like, oh, everybody's so interested in like being with women, and it just like wasn't where my energy was, you know. Um, it's always kind of seemed like a facade. It's always kind of seemed like bullshit. And so that was a gift or an aid in helping me arrive at this place because I wasn't that caught up or that I wasn't in the seduction of the illusion of like what it meant to be an American man, maybe as much as some other people were. And again, that's no merit of my own. That's just given who I was born into, how I was raised, and how I found myself.
So you talked about creation, right? Creating from that persona and then creating from the I. Like, how do you know the difference? Like, how do you know when you're creating from the persona, and then like, how do you allow? How do you set the container for creation from the authentic self?
Hmm. Yeah, it's an awesome question. Thank you. When I'm creating from that place of truth, there is such an innocent joy, Trey. It is like this. I feel like a kid on a playground who's like in a big scene of play. And we're like doing different things, and I'm the king and you're the queen, and here's our prince, and we're building the kingdom. And it's so joyful. And it's just, and when I'm in that place, it feels like anything can happen. It feels like anything can happen. And then the counter to that is I feel protected, or I feel guarded, or I feel calculated. And it's such an easy felt sense for me, right? Like even in this conversation, like, am I here playing connected to the joy of life? Right. And that's like this open, anything's possible feeling. Or am I really self aware of what I'm saying and how that's going to land on an audience and wanting this to be a good episode? And even as I say that, right, like I feel the guardedness and the protectedness. And it's because I'm reinforcing this concept of being this separate entity, you know, that like needs to control my own life to be safe. And over here, when I'm in that place of truth, I don't need to keep myself safe because life has me, right? And I'm a part of the greater ecosystem of life that's just playing its part. And so, yeah, that dance is still always going on inside of me, you know? And if there's ever a time that I'm supposed to be done with feeling like the scared, guarded, protected self, that time's going to come. And it's not going to be because I do an endless amount of shadow work, or because I go take ayahuasca for 6 months in the jungle, or because I really work hard to get rid of that part of myself. Like it's here. It's here for so many good reasons. It's here from hundreds of generations of men before me, right? And my prayer for myself is that just each day I get to open a little bit more to living from that place of truth, because it's really joyful when I'm there.
Well, it's fascinating you say that. Like 6 months of like living in the jungle, doing ayahuasca ceremonies. Like, so when we do that, right? Like, obviously, we've created this idea of Mother Ayahuasca. I've never done ayahuasca, so I don't know if the entity actually is an actual being, or if that's just something we've created as a result from the ceremonies. But like when we go into these spaces, these sacred spaces, and we work with these sacred entities, like, are they showing us our shadow? Are they teaching us what we need in the moment? Are they helping us integrate into our truest, most possible self? Like, I mean, are we, I guess the the question here is like, we do all of these things, right? Are we ever meant to fully conquer the shadow?
Sometimes I have these flashes, Trey, where like I've gone back to that place we come from, whatever you want to call that place. And I'm looking back at my life, and I'm looking back at the most mundane of moments, and I'm feeling, man, I would do anything to go back to that moment. I would do anything to go back to being in a human body where I can smell, where I can taste, where I can feel, and just be standing in the kitchen after a long day making food with my wife. I would do anything to go back there. And so to me, it feels so precious to get to have a human experience, to get to be placed in this body that feels the way it does to be in a body. When something in us knows so deeply where we come from and what we really are and what we're really a part of, right? And so when you ask about the shadow, personally, I'm not that interested in getting to a place where that stuff doesn't exist. I'm really interested in living it fully and doing my really best job to be a good man in living that fully, you know? And so to me, this practice that I'm in right now is I've spent so much of my life trying to change myself and change the external, right? Like, man, if I'm just a little more integrated, I won't act out that pattern. You know, if I'm a little more present, I'll have more joy in this moment. If I'm a little more focused, I'll create what I want in my vocation. And what I'm trying to do right now is widen my capacity to just be present with the way things are, including myself, right? So in that moment when my wife says something and it triggers this pattern in me from when I was 3 years old and I didn't get exactly what I needed from my mom, instead of trying to change that or feeling shame around that, I'm like, man, can I open my presence to just be with the fact that my wife said something that had nothing to do with me and I'm having a really hard time right now. So for me, my life right now is like almost a falling backwards and a widening instead of this like pursuit up the mountain to change something, which I know that energy so well.
Sure. I feel it all the time. Like I've just started noticing the programs when people say things to me that I be either witnessed through modeling of other men in that similar situation, or like even with my son with football, like having a reaction, just watching him exercise or do a run a play, and there's this natural reaction to have like, all right, you need to do this X, Y, and Z better, blah, blah, blah. But a lot of that is just, echoes of men in my past that have said the same things in that situation.
Mm.
And so like my awareness is starting to expand now, but it's still hard for me, like in a lot of men where how much of my daily life is actually me, and how much of that is actually a freaking like record playing, of like past experiences and past programs and scripts that I'm following that, the way that I speak to my wife, is it really the way that I speak to my wife, or is it the way that my dad spoke to my mom, like deciphering that and like really going through that and sitting with that. I mean, how much of the persona is the actual I, like how much of what I think I am is that? And I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Like when you tap into your heart center and you hear me speak to this, like how much, like what is the I, like what is the consciousness that I have in this moment where I feel aware of me speaking words to you and you receiving them, but then also not knowing exactly what the hell's going on, if that makes sense.
Mm. I kind of wonder if the whole trip, Trey, is that orientation to the self itself, right? And I've seen in my own journey, like I've done an endless amount of work on myself. And there's a little bit of gratification after a big breakthrough happens. I'll do something and I'll do some parts work and I'm like, oh, wow, that's where that energy is coming from. Like, oh, thank God, like I got it now. And then the next day I'm back to an internal state of agitation and feeling a disconnection and a little bit of a lack of belonging, right? And maybe then I do a little more parts work or I have a really good meditation. I'm like, oh, okay. It's okay to be me now, right? And then I fall right back down, where it's hard to be me. And I wonder what it would be like for me and for all of us for it to not be so personal, right? When you're having that moment with your wife It's not Trey taking something out on his wife and that makes Trey bad, right? It's like, whoa, this energy that who knows where it's coming from, the collective, my father, my ancestors, some deity, this energy is coming through me. I'm noticing it. It's not feeling harmonious. I'm going to choose something else, right? But it's like almost as if none of it is actually us. It's all just like passing through these vessels. And so it's not our fault, but we have responsibility, right? And so that doesn't mean I'm not encouraging us to just do whatever we're wanting to do, but we get to be responsible for how those energies move inside of us, right? And to me, the reason we don't change is because we get so stuck in shame, because we're so worried that the thing that's expressing through us is a sign that we're actually bad. And so to recognize and to be willing to sit with that would make us bad. And so we harden down to what I was speaking to earlier. The guard goes up. We're even more protected. We're even more cut off from life, right? And so I see this with my own wife, which to me, she's my closest mirror. And it's my most tender, vulnerable relationship because it's a place where the most comes up, right? And there's a way that she can say something to me. And as she's giving feedback or sharing the impact of something I've done, my mind is like, fuck. I'm bad. Like, see, I'm bad. Like, I really am. Something's wrong. How could I do this? Something's wrong. And when I'm in that place, I got to shut down because I'm so scared. And then there's another voice, and it's like this voice of grace that's like, whoa, honey, I'm really hearing that when I did this, it made you feel really unsupported and uncared for. That's such a bummer. I'm not going to do that anymore. Like, even as I say that, there's a smile because there's a connection to life there, right? It's not so personal. It's not so personal. And we live in a culture, Trey, where the focus and every model we have is so on the self. It is so on the self, like look at our idols, look at our athletes. It's like, wow, you did this, LeBron James. You did this, Kamala Harris. You did this, Elon Musk. Like, wow, you did this. And when we hold that energy towards the collective, it also comes back towards ourselves. Whoa, Trey, you did this. When you're impatient with your son in your way, you did this. That's your fault, right? And I'm just not that interested in that, the good side of it or the negative side, right? There seems to be something a little more truthful expressing through us that it seems like we've lost in our Western culture.
Well, how do you how do you, I guess, what interests you, like what interests you and in society, if anything? And then like you're obviously doing work with men, right? And so how is it that you're able to sit with them? And then how do you have these conversations with them about their upbringing and how they've moved through this world? And let's call it, an illusion, like the patriarchal society or patriarchal model of society and what we think is truth. How do you help them sit down and talk about it and break down the barriers, connect, and really just take responsibility for where they're at?
There's something, Trey, that happens in the circle that I've never seen any other place in my life. And I see it in ceremony in the circle. I see it in men's spaces. I see it in other forms of the circle. There's a way that the circle provides us those conditions we need to actually be with the truth. I'll say that again. The circle gives us the conditions we need to actually be with the truth, right? And it's similar to what we were speaking of at the beginning of this conversation. Truth responds to truth, right? And when that frequency is put out, it's like we want to harmonize to that frequency of truth. And so we sit down in a circle and we're invited into that space of truth, right? Beyond the self, beyond the ways that we always perform with our masks, we're invited into that place of truth. And then if something is standing in the way of that truth, we have to be with that before we can touch the truth. So we don't need to go looking towards our past. We don't need to go diving into the shadow just for the sake of going into the shadow or looking at our past. We sit there and we're like, what is the truth of my life? And it might be like, I hear this so often with men, like, fuck, I have something so precious to give this life. I have something so precious I want to give to life. I hear this all the time from people who are like successful startup founders, people across all like facets of work. When they really tune in, they're like, I have something so precious to give life and I'm not doing it. And I'm not doing it. Right. And so we touch that truth. And then it's like, well, what's in the way? Right. What's stopping us from that natural expression? And then we get to be with everything that comes up. Then we get to have the conversations around the things that happened to us at 3 and 4 and 5 years old, those things we saw at 13 and 14 and 15, all of those uninitiated sexual experiences we've had that shut down life, because there's something so precious pulling us forward. There's something like this flower, this blossoming flower on the horizon that we know is ours to offer. And so we got to show up to walk the path, right? And that's my own journey. Like for me to show up the way that I want to show up in these men's spaces, I have to move through all of those places in me that don't trust life. And all of the places in me that don't trust life are because I had some experience at some point in this lifetime or in a previous lifetime where I learned it was safer to shut down to life than to stay open. And if I really want to step into the fullest expression of my being in this lifetime, I have to tend to all of those places where life got stuck, such that life can then flow through me again in service to that reason for my life. And so, yeah, I'm resonating with that.
Well, how does modern society, like the idea, the concept that we have of like what is the status quo, like how is that disconnected from life?
How is that disconnected from life? Well, yeah, I mean, so yeah, in the past 250 years, we've lost 96% of our old growth forest on this continent. We've killed 50 to 100 million indigenous people who were living connected to place and tending that place for tens of thousands of years. We have the highest suicide, depression, anxiety rates there's ever been in the history of humans. 56% of kids under 12 years old have a chronic disease, right? Like I could go on and on and on, and we don't need to belabor that point. But these are all symptoms that we are living in a way deeply disconnected from life. Because if you look at any other species in the forest, in whatever ecosystem, nobody is as diseased as we are as a species, right? Nobody is as diseased as we are as a species, unless we've harmed their ecosystem and they're adapting to oil spills and to air pollution and changing temperatures and all of these things. And so we were born into a really sick time. And I'll say it again, it's not our fault, but it's our responsibility, right? It's not our fault and it's not our responsibility. And you and I both know, Trey, as men, and I could even cry with this, like what we got from our dads and what we didn't get from our dads. Like we both know it. Without even saying it, you and I can just look at each other and be like, fuck, yeah. Like I love my dad and like, fuck, fuck, like that's what he got from his father. And that's what he got from his father. And we can trace it back to whatever lineage we're coming from, like fleeing persecution in Europe in the 17 and 1800s and arriving on these shores totally desolate and separated from the only home they've ever known. I can go back to my dad's lineage, which were Jews fleeing the Pale of Russia in the late 1800s, had been on the run for 2,000 years, right? Hadn't lived in more than one place for 150 years. Like think about what that does to a spirit. And so here we are as the result of all of those things that happened, right? All of those places where life hurt. And man, you and I have this opportunity to choose something else. Man, we have the opportunity to open our hearts to our sons, to our wives in a way that my dad never could, that his dad never could, that his dad never could. Right. And so, yeah, it feels like really sick times that we've incarnated into. And I feel the grief of that so often, where I'm like, man, it takes this much work just to live in a natural, good way. I have to fight this much uphill just to have a sane life. And it can break me sometimes. And also, I'm then like, wow, I get to be a flame carrier. You get to be a torch bearer in the dark. Like what a special thing we get to do being born right now, right? And to me, our species depends on it. Like if we continue this way of living, we won't have a place on earth in a generation or two. And so it's our capacity to recognize what's come from before that's been passed into us, and then to choose something else, that's going to make it possible for our species to keep being here. Like, man, what a time to be alive. What a time to get to be here. And especially as men, when the entire structure of the patriarchy is falling, when the entire system is breaking down in front of our eyes, that you and I get to be here to birth something new through us. Like,
100%.
that's precious.
Yeah, it's a huge responsibility because, like, to your point, like I do see myself, in the same patterns that my father had, which I love him very much. And then, but again, he got it from his father, who got it from his father. And as I look at my children, who are mirrors of who I am, like how can I show up and be like just loving of them? And it's not perfect. Like my kids trigger me too, and it's like they trigger those parts of myself that I deny love,
Mm.
and so it's just having that awareness. So like when I get emotional or have an emotional response to something, like to bring awareness to that has been the biggest challenge for me, because like automatically I want to fall into a pattern and to choose a different pattern. Like when you choose to be something totally different, when you chose this life for yourself, when you choose to be change, I feel like there's some type of natural resistance to that. Like when you decided to live your life the way that you are living it currently, and the work that you're doing and being that torchbearer and that light for men, like what is the natural resistance that starts to arise? Is it the status quo? Is it the programs? Like what is it that has been the biggest barrier for you in this moment?
Trey, I want to ask you a question, if I may, and then I'll come back to that.
Sure.
Yeah. I'm curious in those moments. You have a son, right? You have one son.
I have one son, two daughters.
Yeah. So when you're with your son and you notice yourself like talking to your son the way that your dad talked to you, right? Talking to your son the way your dad talked to you. Like, what is the experience that arises when you catch that? And then what does it feel like for you when you choose something else? When you catch the moment and then you choose something else? Like what is your felt experience of that?
So I can immediately feel the anger, right?
Mm.
Because he's not behaving in a way that I prefer. And then through that anger, I can somehow catch myself being aware of the anger arising and where it's arising. And
Yeah.
then when I choose something totally different, I don't know what's right or wrong. Like I'm just choosing something totally different. And I'm just, there is no rule book or there is no playbook that I'm following. I'm just kind of like trying my best to be what I think a good dad should be in that moment, not what I've been, but something totally different. So I don't, there is no playbook for that. It's just kind of like maybe I'm following my heart in that instance, like where I'm like, instead of criticizing right now, I'm just going to love. And instead of like
Mm.
really beating the point, I'm just going to have a conversation around it and just feel him out and see what happens, and instead of like really trying to say, all right, you've done this right, you've done this wrong, let's try this a little bit better. I'm just kind of being more open to what he has to say, what feedback he has, and just kind of honoring that a little bit more and not really being judgmental and like really playing with that idea of, how like you come more into your heart space and you're allowing things to flow. Like when I can catch it, I'm doing the same thing and I don't know what's right or wrong. I'm allowing things to flow.
Mm. Thank you, Trey. Is there, when you're in that space, like, and you choose something different and you're allowing things to flow, are you having a more pleasant eternal experience than when you're acting out the same rutted pattern?
I would say it's more connected. I would say
Yeah.
it's like I feel a more deeper connection with him, and he's so young. I just don't know if it's hitting him the same way it's hitting me. But you know what I mean? Like I just know that it's different in that moment than what I have experienced, and it's building more moments like that are different than what I previously experienced.
Yeah. Yeah. I just want to take a moment, Trey, to celebrate that because, as your son comes into his manhood and his adulthood and he wrestles with his purpose on this earth and what he came here to do, like every single moment you catch that rutted pattern and choose to open is going to be less shit he's got to clear to step into his purpose. And actually, it might even be wind in his sails to step into his purpose. And so to me, those micro moments matter so much. They matter so much because it's shaping his entire nervous system. It's shaping his entire felt sense of safety. And Like, yeah, what a gift for you to be conscious enough in your best moments to choose something that serves his life instead of cuts his life off at the knees.
Sure. Yeah, and a lot of that is around, like, and I'm being totally honest here, like, him with video games, like, he just loves video games, and so I think there is a narrative going around that that is bad, but I also find, like, the curiosity of, like, how does that allow him to create, like, new opportunities, new realities for himself?
And
And so, like, I'm not trying to be like the old stern father, like, you play too much video games. I think there is a cutoff point where, like, you can't just play like 12 hours a day. I think there's obviously some health risks there, but allowing them to get into that space of imagination and creation to where that fuels that and really allows them to think of alternate options for them in life and not say you should be this or like you should be more of this. I think allowing him to be more of what he can possibly be. Like he's playing football right now. First time in his life he's ever played football. And we look at it as a challenge for him and pushing his own barriers. And he's doing, I mean, who knows if he's going to make the team, but the fact that he's actually doing something totally outside of his comfort zone and me just surrounding him and just support and just saying, dude, man, like just the fact that you're doing something totally outside of your comfort zone. And like each day you do it, you're just getting better as a human being and having a totally different experience than what you're used to is so awesome. Like I want to support that and nurture that. And if he makes the team, man, I am serious. We're going to celebrate, dude. We're going to freaking celebrate. But if he doesn't make the team, we're going to freaking celebrate because this man, this boy who's becoming a man is experiencing expansion, on so many different levels. And just to be able to be a part of that, like to me is like a deep honor, of just being able to have this perspective of where I'm at in life and like what that means to him to go through this trial of mental development and physical development and just spiritually just tapping into something higher than yourself to really figure like you're more than what you think, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I feel joy hearing that. And yeah, you said exactly what I wanted to speak to, which you asked the question of what limits us from like accessing that place of truth, right? From moving into that place of deeper truth. And one of my best friends and mentors, and actually the person co-facilitating this next 8-month council with me, her name's Becky. And she says, she's like, look, for a long time, we've been surviving as humans. We've been surviving. We now have this opportunity to thrive. Right? And so what limits my own growth, and even what I hear in this story about your son, is we look at our past and we're like, hey, it hasn't been the best thing in the whole world, but like I'm still alive at like a base level. Like I've had food to eat, I've had shelter, I've had a warm bed, like I'm alive. It's probably safe if I just keep doing that same stuff that's gotten me into this point, because at least I'm alive, at least I'm surviving. And there's a way that that's comfortable for the nervous system. We know it. Even if it's harmful, we know it. We know it. And then there's this opportunity to say, oh man, in this moment, what would really be allowing myself to be in contact with life? What would allow me to be in contact with life to the fullest extent that I can? And that isn't the past. It's not. Like we're on this journey of opening, of growing. So it's not the things that we've done up until this point. And that is deeply uncomfortable in some ways to our survival, right? Like, well, I've always stayed 12 feet off the edge of the cliff, and I'm just going to stay 12 feet off the edge of the cliff. And then these hearts, these souls, this purpose for our life is like, no, go to the edge. Please walk to the edge, because that's where your life lives. That's where something gets to come through you. And it's always a dance. And I think about it to me, even in these micro moments of, can I be vulnerable in connection with my neighbor? Can I be vulnerable in connection with my parents, with my wife, right? Because safety has known a lack of vulnerability. And even though I have these imprints of like, whoa, I'm vulnerable and I'm exposed and it's actually really juicy, the majority of my experiences are when I'm closed down, I'm safer. And so even in those like micro moments of like, can I open a little bit more to this moment? Can I open a little bit more to this moment? And the reason I was asking you about your internal state with your son is because I find that when I open, there's like a rush of joy or exhilaration, almost as if like I just jumped off that cliff a little bit, where I'm like, whoa, everything that's held me down and tied me to this point is now released. And there's so much life here. There's so much life. And so yeah, that's my prayer for my own life and for all of us, right? That we have the resource and the conditions, the support, the people holding our hands that allow us to walk to that edge, to put away what's kept us safe up until this point, and to step into a life where we have more contact with this reality of being alive, you know?
I agree 100%. I think for me, I have recently been researching a lot of like the indigenous cultures as far as like ceremonies and connections and rituals, and how, you know, to your point earlier, there was such a connection with life and with Mother Earth and the sacred mother that we have lost, I think, through modern civilization. It's almost like life has become sterile, where they had meaning in everything. I mean, they did medicine rituals for everything that they did, every stage of their lives. And, you know, in modern day society, I don't, you know, what I see milestones like, you know, sweet 16 and turning 21, and then you can go drink your face off. But like, as far as like the indigenous people, the more organic cultures, like everything had meaning, and they really took time to honor that. And so, like, I see your work. It is a very potent medicine for men. It allows you to come back into nature. But I wonder, like, setting the container in nature, like, how does nature nurse us back to well-being? Like, what is it like when we go out and do a vision quest, or we go out into nature and we do a cold plunge, or we just go for a walk? Like, what is it about nature that really just heals those parts of us that feel sterile, that disconnection? Like, how does it strengthen that connection to who we are, you know?
Trey, we don't, unless we were born to really awakened parents, we don't know unconditional love in the human form. We don't know unconditional love. We know conditioned love. Even if we had parents that were doing such a good job in working on themselves, we still have conditioned love. You do something, you do the right thing that works for me, you get a smile, you get a kiss, you get a hug, you get dinner. There's this connection that I know in my life with the mother, like the real source of my life, you know, like our bodies, no matter how separate we think we are, come out of this earth. They are earth material. They are stardust. They're the same things that make up everything we see in the most pristine old growth forests. We're those same elements, right? There's a way that that love is totally unconditional. The way that this earth can love her sons, can love her daughters, can love her children, that you and I have never felt in the human form, where anything is welcome. Anything is welcome. No matter what we're feeling, what is stuck, what we're carrying, it is welcome. It is welcome. It is welcome. And so that frequency in itself, that we belong no matter what we do. Imagine a culture with that at her underpinning, right? And that's what intact culture is. You belong no matter what you do. And goodness, we couldn't be further from that right now, right? You belong if you have the right hairstyle. You belong if you have the right job. You belong if you have the right political beliefs. You belong if you say the right thing, right? You belong if you're a man who doesn't get angry. We could go on and on and on. And as we're in that paradigm, it's like this is, I'm holding my arms fully wide. This is who we really are. And then we learn, oh, I only belong if this. 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 And now we have 2% of ourself left. We have 2% of ourself left, right? And there's this way that when we're with the earth, we realize that that entire spectrum of our being has a place here, right? And I would say with that, so we live in the Appalachian Mountains, my family does, and we're pretty far out. We're 30 minutes from the closest town. And when I'm just out in the woods, which is every single day, nothing in the natural world is trying to be anything other than what it is. Nothing is trying to be anything other than what it is, you know? And there's trees with all kinds of different shapes, and there's squirrels with all different kinds of personality characteristics, if you want to call it that. And nobody's trying to be different. They're just playing their place in the scheme of life. No one's trying to scheme to be bigger than who they are or play smaller than what they are. They know they have a place in the ecosystem and they're just doing that. And so that frequency has had a really big impact on me. It's had a really big impact on me when I'm just like walking through the woods and I'm like, man, that oak tree is just being the oak tree. It started as an acorn. It followed its DNA that lived in that tiny acorn. And now it's this epic oak tree that sits right outside my office window, right? Like that's what it became by just being itself. And so that's just this reminder to me that I too came out of a seed. I too have a blueprint that's in service to this entire life around me. Can I just allow myself to become that blueprint? Not what I think I should be, what I think I shouldn't be. Can I just allow myself to become that blueprint? And so in these spaces with men, that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. We're not living up to this idea of a good man or a noble man or a worthy man. We're saying, hey, brother, when you're given the conditions to actually feel your blueprint, what is that? What is that longing that is so deep in your heart that has to come to life for you to find gratification in this lifetime? What is that blueprint? Can we help you live it? Can we help you live it? Because if all of us are walking around living as our blueprint, that is a well world. That is a well world. And that is what intact culture was to me. It was people being born into a place where they belonged and where they knew their role. And when everybody played their role, life could go on for tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of years in the same places because we were doing what was actually ours to do. And as we both know, we're so far from that today. We're so far from that today.
What is your role now, right? Like, what does that look like?
What I feel is one of the deepest calls of my life is to feel what's happening on this earth right now. Is to feel what's happening on this earth right now. And it feels like when I'm at my healthiest place, when I have the support that I need, when I'm taking care of myself, my joy is in feeling, in sitting down and opening my heart to what's happening in Palestine, to opening my heart to what's happening in the Congo, to opening my heart to the remnants of the old growth forests that are being logged now in the Appalachian Mountains because the logging industry found a really clever way to get a bill passed in the North Carolina House, right? It's to actually feel what's going on and to let that inform my life. And I don't think that that's everybody's role, right? But that's where I know that there's something special that's coming through me. On my best days, my capacity to feel is my offering to this earth.
Yeah. So is there a part of you when you feel that, like, is there a responsibility to make change, create change? And what does that look like, right? I mean, there's so much, I'm just going to call it, there's a lot of chaos that happens in this world, right? And so when you're open to that and your awareness surrounds that, like, what is our responsibility to that change and in trying to improve that chaos in the world?
We have to tend what's ours. We have to tend what's ours. And if we're honest with ourselves, we know what ours is. We know what ours is. And on a given day, what's ours might be the way that we greet our wife when she gets home from work. And it might be the choice to spend 2 minutes grounding into our body and opening our heart. So when our wife walks in the door, she has the most loving moment of her day. And in that moment, something heals between the masculine and the feminine. That might be what is ours on a day. And on another day, it might be that what is ours is to go to a protest, pushing back against an oil pipeline that's going through the backyard of poor Black and brown people. And that might authentically be what is ours on that day, And then the next day, what is ours might be to put some seeds in the soil and help our kids grow their first tomatoes. And that might be what is ours on that day. And I think we live at a time, Trey, where we're really interested in telling people what they ought to be doing and what is theirs to tend. And it doesn't work, because if we're showing up for these change-making activities from a disconnected, inauthentic place, we're actually just feeding the same evil that put that injustice into the world. And so we have to really trust that each of us tend what is ours. We tend what is ours. We tend what is ours. And I have this adage in my life right now that I say to myself and to a lot of friends is, we need less coaches and we need more good neighbors, right? We need less coaches and we need more good neighbors. And How do we look around at our life, the people that live next to us, the people that live in the same house as us, the people who drink the same water as us, and how do we take good care of them? How do we take good care of them, right? We've never seen, humans have never evolved living in a global culture. There's a way that culture has inspired and informed across continents, but there's never been a time that we've known what's going on 7 different continents, and we're tracking all of that. And that's what media has done. That's what what Facebook and Instagram and TikTok has done. And there's a way for me that I'm just like trying to look at this very watershed, like the house we live on, we're the top of the watershed, right? So that means that all of the water in the valley beneath us, which is about 200 people, a lot of it starts on our land. It comes out on springs in our land. That means something really special to me, right? Like that's people's drinking water, their bathing water, the water they garden with they water their gardens with. Like, how do I take care of that? Because that's what's actually mine to tend, right? And then some days I wake up, and I was just in DC, like meeting with a bunch of senators around the Mountain Valley Pipeline, because there's that energy where I'm like, and there's something else to do too. There's a pipeline that I want to push back against because I don't believe in pipelines anymore, you know? And there's like that going back to rap, to that very point we started with. There's an innocent joy when we're doing what's ours to do. And there's often a feeling of burden, obligation, and overwhelm when we're doing something that isn't ours to do. And we're trying to live from some idea of ourselves. And it's like, we all know that, Trey. Like, you know that so deeply when you're in that innocent joy where life's just bubbling through, and when you're in that burdened, closed place. And it's like, okay, which one of these do I want to live by to create the reality for this world?
It sounds like you're really embodying this physical vessel here in this reality. Like a lot of people on the spiritual path seem to like want to go play in the ethers, want to go play in other realms, other dimensions, but it seems like you're really embodying this reality right now. My curiosity is just kind of like going, like, I really want to like toy with the notion of you, like, you know, because you sound very connected to something deep and authentic within your being. Like, have you ever experienced other like dimension realities kind of stuff? Like, you know, have you done ayahuasca? Have you done these different modalities? Like, have you seen like truth at a, I guess, meta vantage point, if that makes sense?
Trey, I'm going to give you the answer that I want to give, not the answer that you might want for the podcast, but there's a part of me that even struggles with the nature of these questions, because I'm like, Trey, I don't have anything that you don't have, that any of the listeners don't have. Like, I'm not some special being, right? Like, and it's not even about me. Like, that's the trip. It's not even about me, you know, like whatever I'm carrying is just what my ancestors, what my creator, what this earth needed me to come carry right now. And it has nothing to do with me. And I'll be so honest, 0 of it is by my own volition. 0 of it is by my own volition. And as much as I want to think that I'm like this way because I meditate every day and I do breath work and I sit in ceremony, that's not why I am this way. I'm this way because I came to this earth at this time to bring something that we need on this earth, just like you did, just like you did, and just like your wife did, and just like your son did, and just like my neighbor Randy did, right? And so it really has nothing to do with me. I'm not any form of a special being. Like, I'm not. I'm just here in this body doing my best in this experience, allowing on my best days what wants to come through. And it is not me. It is not me. Mm-hmm. And it's a paradox, right? Because I know that we cultivate ourselves, and we make choices. And if I woke up and watched porn every morning instead of meditate, I'd probably be a little bit different, you know, just because of the frequency that those two things hold. And like, man, whatever is coming through me is the same exact stuff that comes through you, Trey. It's the same exact stuff that's wanting to come through you.
Sure. I'm just so curious to one subjective experience, because, like, you know, obviously studying psychology, there's, you know, a lot of people look at it as, you know, it's just a subjective experience. It's not much of qualitative evidence, of a different reality. But I really enjoy speaking with people because everyone has a different experience. You can go you can go have a scale and measure and have different averages and means and all of this, but like listening to your story and just the way that you perceive life, just from your view is beautiful. Like just having a conversation with you. I feel like we touch depths that I've just barely scratched at times, and to like fully understand where you stand in life and how you connect with that to me is just so enriching and so like I don't know, it just gives perspective on like how other people may do that for themselves. And so like I want to understand more fully, exactly how they experience reality, because we were told one way, right? It goes back to that status quo. It goes back to the illusion of like what is true reality. We're living in separate homes right now, like in cookie cutter new build communities that are separate, and we learn not to talk to our neighbors, and we learn to uh, keep up with the Joneses, and we have to do X, Y, and Z to be successful. And so like what happens when people hear about other people's realities and experiences, whether they're in different dimensions or this reality, is that they start to question their own. And they're like, what is truth? What is my truth in this reality? Like and some people aren't even open to the possibility of different dimensions or like many worlds theories or hypotheses or even quantum, some of the newer science and quantum physics, but because it shakes the old paradigm of like, where they may be at. And so just, having this conversation with you, sir, has been like one of the greatest treats that I've had, because I know how deep you can go. And to feel what you're tapping into feels like truth to me, right? To just listening to you speak and just being in your presence at the place in Baltimore, in Tribe, Baltimore, at Breathwork and Brotherhood, to me was an experience I've never had before that. And to watch you facilitate and create a container where there is unconditional love, like the first time I've ever experienced that at a level as an adult male on the East Coast, was beautiful. And so I just want to say thank you for the work that you do and for the awareness that you bring in this moment, and to having a conversation with me on this platform, because I feel like a lot of people will resonate with your message and become more curious to who they are and to their reality of what truth is. Like, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah. I feel touched by your reflection of that night at Breathwork and Brotherhood. And I feel like kind of giggly at the mystery that like one evening seemed to have a lot of ripples. And that just makes me really proud of life, and really grateful to Tribe and the way that that came together. That almost didn't happen 2 days before, like signups were low. And I was like, Gary, it doesn't make sense to fly up to Baltimore. We're going to lose money on this. And Gary's like, you're coming. He's like the manager at Tribe. He's like, you're coming. We will fill that space. And we did fill that space. And I think what I would say there, Trey, is that I'm not that interested in other dimensions and realities. I fucking love being on Earth. Man, I think it's like the coolest thing fucking ever to get to be on Earth. Like to have like everything we could ever need to eat is grown by sunshine and water. If we take care of this place, like to me, we've been given Eden. We legitimately have been given Eden. And there's a way to live here that is so plentiful and beautiful and connected. And I'm in devotion to that, and so I don't want to be other places. Like I don't. And it's so special to get to be here when we do it well, and so then that's a question of how do we do it well. And this is what I want to close with is we all, doesn't matter how much work we've done on ourselves or we haven't, we know truth. We know truth. We feel it when it's spoken. We feel it in a piece of art. We feel it in a song. We know truth, right? And we all have that capacity moment by moment to discern. Is this an opening to life? Is there an innocent, joyful expression in what is happening? Or is this feeling of being closed, agitated, frustrated, burdened? We all have that barometer. We have that barometer. And as we continue to make choices from that place of that innocent joy, that openness to life, moment by moment, it doesn't mean we blow up our entire life and build a community in Costa Rica because we're going to live in a village no matter what it takes, right? It's just moment by moment we open to that. We say no to the things that no longer serve our life because we're feeling it. We're feeling it. We're feeling it. So we say no to those things. We withdraw our sovereign will from those places that aren't serving life. And over time, it's like a snowball that builds and builds and builds. And then one day we'll look around, and maybe it's in this lifetime, or maybe it's 5 generations from now, and we'll say, wow, this is what it actually means to be a human. Look what we've done. We've restored the cultural topsoil for being a human being on this earth. And it just comes from those moment by moment by moment decisions. And that's the truth that I can offer, right? Because that's the only truth that I've lived. That it just happens slowly but surely. Slowly but surely. And it actually doesn't work if we're still operating in this consciousness from that closed, scared, burdened, shut down place. And we go create the most beautiful land-based community where we're growing all of our own food and we sit in circle every night and we raise each other's kids. If it's coming from this consciousness of the closure to life, it is not contributing to the healing of this planet in any way, shape, or form. And if our actions are coming from this consciousness of the innocent joy of life bubbling through us, no matter what we do is sending a healing ripple into this earth. And that to me is what people like Mother Teresa and Gandhi have modeled for us. That it's these small acts done with great love that actually create this world that we're longing for. And so that's what lights me up more than anything, are these acts that if I stay steady on the path and I can uplift other people and give them the conditions to make those choices, I really believe, Trey, that we have this potential that one day, and I don't know how many years from now because I don't get to see stuff like that, but one day, some number of years from now, we're going to look around and we're going to be living in villages where we belong again. We're going to be taking care of this earth. We're going to be in the conscious recognition that this earth is taking care of us. And we're going to be in this deep interconnected relationship with all of life. And at that place, we'll look at each other and we'll be like, this is what it means to be human, brother. This is what it means to be human. Isn't this something special? And it's our job to hold that belief that that's possible while we're swimming in these really chaotic, dark, apocalyptic times.
I love it, man. Be the light. Thomas, dude, this has been awesome. I can't thank you enough. How can people find you? How can they connect?
We are on heartofmen.community. That's where all of our men stuff is, Heart of Men. And so, yeah, sign up if you want more information there.
Brother, thank you for sharing this space.
Thank you, Trey.